And speaking of another specialist tank, next up is the Tau Skyray. Now, the Skyray is the Tau's perimeter and air defense vehicle. And once again, this is based on the Devilfish chassis that's armed with Seeker missiles. Now, these things apparently are rarely encountered in large numbers, which means it would seem that these vehicles are very, very rare to produce, obviously. It tends to only carry 6 Seeker missiles mounted in a 360-degree traversable turret, and also mounts a pair of networked marker lights and a target lock support system, allowing the Skyray to aim and fire its own missiles against 2 separate targets at once. And it does tend to have a secondary armament of either a pair of independently aimed burst cannons, a pair of skydrones, or another smart missile system. Now, it's got a pilot, a gunner, weighs in at 24 tons, and has a top speed of 70 kilometers an hour.
So, the Skyray turret is apparently just as heavy as the Hammerhead turret. And they replaced all the internals to support this. However, this to me feels like it's sole real. It has 2 real purposes. It's a SAM battery, i.e. sight-to-air missile, or it's an anti-tank missile launcher. But there's an issue with this for me. We've proven that solely relying on anti-tank missiles is a bad idea, because the British had a vehicle called the Swingfire. And as nice and awesome as the Swingfire was, without an actual gun, it was kind of useless when it encountered non-armored targets. Which I could see that would be a good reason why they equipped the secondary weapon to this thing to compensate for that. And also the other problem with the Swingfire is it would run out of ammunition. It only carried 20 missiles. Well, if it fires off, well, in the case of the Skyray, I think it only carries 6
That's
missiles.
right, yeah.
That's it. And then you have to go back and reload. I would imagine you would be very, very careful with those 6 missiles. Like, you would really have to sit there and judge, do I fire at this target or not? And while it has all the marker light equipment itself and is integrated into the network, that also means that these missiles are relying on either the gunner to get a lock or someone else to get a lock on a target before it fires. And I'm not quite sure how marker lights work, but if they work anything like laser designators, that could get really confusing for a missile if there's like 8 laser designators pointed out there and it needs to figure out which one you actually want it to follow. I'm thinking this is just strictly a support vehicle. Like, that's all it has the same shape as the Devilfish, which we've gone over. It has the big engines for weak points. Those its sides flatten out for weak points. If it's not directly facing you, its armor is actually being penalized, which, to give an illustration of a modern vehicle that had that same issue, all the Russian heavy tanks that came with the pike nose, that was why they discontinued the pike nose, was because if that wasn't pointed right at you, it's actually hurting its own armor. So, this thing has that same issue. If it's not pointing right at you, it's hurting its own armor. And on top of that, I don't see it being super effective. The Tau might think it's super effective. Fine, fair enough. This, strictly to me, is an anti-air support unit. With the occasional, oh look, we need something to shoot at a armored vehicle type of deal. It's not going to function as much else. And you shouldn't expect it to.
No, not at all. Okay then, so moving on, we're going to move on to one of the Tau battle suits. We're going to move on to the Storm Surge. Now, the Storm Surge is essentially a heavy weapons platform that's basically a small Titan. Now, unusually for a Tau battle suit, which only has 1 crew, this one actually has 2. Which is very bizarre. I mean, I can imagine this being something more akin to like that film Pacific Rim in the way they operate. Um, Now, it has a primary weapon of either a pulse driver cannon or a pulse arc cannon, but it has an absolute crap ton of numerous secondary weapon systems, including cluster rocket system pods, 4 destroyer missiles, 2 air burst fragmentation projectors, 2 smart missile systems, 2 burst cannons, and twin-linked flamers. Now, the immense power of its weapon system means that its reactors there's 2 slow charge reactors, and it is essentially a walking tank. But it has been able to be used as a platform to test experimental weapons that are generally so big and heavy they can only be used really on spacecraft.
Holy crap. So we don't really have a modern comparison to this. However, out of all of the Titans we have talked about, this one appears to be the most practical. It's not super tall. It's not so massive that you would need to redefine physics to get it to work. However, as we've just described, it's a big target, and it's very slow. The 2 pilot system, I'm guessing is this new sci-fi theory that you could link 2 people's brains together if they're on the same wavelength, or however you want to describe however it works. I honestly don't know if that would work. We don't know enough about how brain biology works to know if we could link 2 brains together directly and have them work in sync. We honestly don't.
In fairness, though, with the Tau species, it might be their brains might be quite compatible because they have that caste system.
True.
It's possible that since they've been using the caste system for so long, that only, like, for example, there's a theory that interbreeding between castes is no longer biologically possible. They basically evolved into separate subspecies.
Ooh.
Now, because these 2 are obviously they're going to be like, is it fire caste or earth caste? I'm not 100% sure.
I think it's Firecast is the only ones who actually go into combat.
Yes, the earth caste who designed the weapons. But because these 2 obviously are fire caste, they might, their brains might operate on a nigh identical wavelength, which obviously would make a dual link up to their brains much more feasible. But again, it also you have to take into consideration a Tau's own physiology, because obviously their nervous system will be different from a human nervous system.
True.
So for their species, it probably would be possible, but even if it's not possible for ours.
Now, what I have to look at here is that the Pulse Ordnance multi-driver, those 3 massive cannons on the back, are equivalent of what we would refer to as a mass driver. Literally takes a superheated ball of plasma, throws it at something, and at a very, very high velocity, and uses a combination of heat and kinetic energy to destroy a target. We have theories about how this works. We've also created plasma and shot it but it only lasted a total of 2 seconds and only traveled a total of 80 feet before it dissipated into the air. This is a feasible weapon system, and it's combining kinetic penetration with shape charge, which would absolutely be amazing if we understood a way to get that to work together. If you're talking about a kinetic kinetic penetrator that goes, say, halfway through an armor and then detonates into a shaped charge, you've already done most of the work for the shaped charge, and you've definitely bypassed space armor and explosive reactive armor and any other defenses that are designed to stop a shaped charge. Now you're just dealing with the composition of the metal itself. However, I said this was the most practical of the walkers. I do have a problem with its lower leg sections looking like they're completely unarmored. That may be because they need the extra articulation. But the lower legs are probably going to be a common spot to shoot at. The reason it's the most practical is because most of the walkers I've seen have just one big flat foot and are super tall. This is not more than a couple stories tall, which we've determined you can do. You can build a machine right now with our current technology to walk around on two legs and it'll only be 2 or 3 stories tall. More importantly, the distribution system here is on a prong. You have a main prong out front and you have 2 other prongs, one of which is very small and strictly for balance, and the other is the same length as the main prong and just as strong. So what you're doing in effect is you're redistributing the weight in a significant enough manner that you're not crushing the metal at the bottom.
In essence, you got toes.
Basically. Because it basically has these toes. It's kind of like how you would prevent your legs from breaking when you do a low altitude parachute drop. You roll the weight as you land so that you don't land stiff leg. Well, this does that for them by redistributing the weight to multiple points of impact. Which, I gotta admit, that's pretty brilliant. And since they didn't have to make it, the size of a skyscraper to get the same amount of firepower, I really begin to wonder if in this universe, if the Tau ever built something the size of a skyscraper, we should all be terrified and run for cover.
It's funny you should mention that, because next up is the Tauna Supremacy Armor. Now, the Tauna Supremacy Armor is the largest class of battlesuit in the Tau's armory. It's basically the biggest Titan the Tau themselves have. It's designed to take on anything from Imperial Knights to giant tyrannic creatures. Now, it lacks the maneuverability of other battlesuits, but makes up for this with static defense. Now, it tends to carry, as its primary weapon, a back-mounted pulse Ordnance multi-driver, with additional weaponry including triple ion cannons, fusion eradicators on each arm, 2 chest-mounted stations known as the Vigilance Defense System with burst cannons and missile pods, and even provided with a barrier shield generator which can withstand Titan-class weaponry.
What? Okay. So, this suit isn't even on the size chart that I have for the Tau suit sizes. It kind of stops at the Storm Surge. Now, they are attempting, once again, for that redistribution of weight, which if you want to build something this tall is probably the way to go. As we mentioned earlier with the Warlord Titan in the first episode of this, you probably want a quad walker instead of a biped. So I don't know how this thing supports itself.
Magic.
Second off, I'm imagining that it's using the same system. So again, I have no idea how the 2 brains are actually linked together in a significant manner in which they are not fighting each other. But as far as firepower and goes, that is a whole hell of a lot of DACA.
The Orcs would be proud.
I don't think an orc could figure out how to fit more guns on this thing practically.
Oh, they could.
You're right. They would probably do it just to prove me wrong because they put guns on their guns. Holy crap, that is a lot of firepower. And I'm going to make a Mech Warrior reference because we did understand that by having this much firepower and a lot of it being energy-based, you build heat. Because the reactor heats up as it does more and more stuff. Similar to your computer CPU, the more stuff you're doing on your computer, the more your power supply needs and the more the computer heats up. Because the CPU's working harder. Well, now the reactor's working harder and harder. I don't see a ventilation system on this vehicle at all. Where are you putting all of that heat? Where's it going? Or are you literally just firing and then letting everything cool off before you fire again without actually expelling the heat outward, but having an internal cooling system? Which, if you have an internal cooling system cooling off that much heat, congratulations!
It's possible that's what they're doing, because it is designed primarily as a static defense, and it's wrong. So that's probably why it hasn't got any like exhaust or anything to expel all that heat, because if it's not going to be moving around as much, it's just basically a gigantic mobile turret.
Which I have a problem with. And this comes into warfare theory. If all of the Tau's other vehicles say speed kills, and then you bring in something that's not designed to move, how does this incorporate into your doctrine? Like, how did you justify having something that is not designed around speed kills? If you justified it on the sole purpose of, well, the enemy has things that aren't on this doctrine and it works, that's a pretty bad idea, because the rest of your doctrine is not designed around this. I could see this thing getting left behind by the rest of the Tau's forces when they start a counterattack. I could also see it getting isolated because it can't keep up. And really big, really super powerful unit, isolated, big old target for everything that wants to see it dead. Just like with the Titans are big and powerful that we've seen so far, but if you, as I mentioned, if you don't really have something to support them and make sure that they are properly aligned in your battle array, they're going to get isolated and take it down. And with this thing, yeah, it has that issue. The other issue I have is the fact that it has this really, really tiny head that just looks like a giant camera. Practicality design purposes, you probably wouldn't put that head there. You would just put external cameras, and if one of them got knocked out, fine. Maybe they require that sensor array, and okay, if that's what you want to go with, fine. I would have made it less obvious. The last issue is, again, it has no secondary ventilation system. I see ventilation systems on the guns to expel gases, to expel heat, but I don't actually see a ventilation system for the reactor. Unless there's something on the back that I'm missing, because I don't actually have a picture. I couldn't find a picture of the back of this one. That's a problem. Unless they've got some super ultimate internal cooling system, it's going to heat up, and they're going to be sitting there going, right, we can't fire right now. Shoot.
Well, they would shoot if the weapon system would cool down.
Exactly. The only other issue I really have with it is, like the other Tau walkers, they don't have a lot of sloping on their armor, and their weapon systems are fully exposed all the time. Kind of makes me wonder if it's gonna get hit and penetrated. They talk about an energy shield. Okay, fine. I had to go look it up and see if we had any practical theories on energy shields. Turns out not only do we have practical theories, but people have started figuring out how to get an energy shield to work for a few seconds. It is practical that the energy shield protects this thing and keeps it protected. But you can only divert so much power to that energy shield, and as soon as it goes down, protection's gone. I imagine that this is like a lot of the other Tau vehicles, and it's not super heavy, thick armor. I mean, I could actually see the armor plating on the legs and can go, that's about as thick as a fire warrior's hand. That's not very thick. So whatever it's made out of is obviously super strong, but it's not designed to take hits once the shields go down. As I can also see from the fact that, just like the Storm Surge, the lower leg sections have no armor, and we talked about this with Warlord and Warhound Titans, infantry are going to run up and throw explosives on the legs and hope that it knocks the leg out, because if the leg goes down, the whole thing comes crashing down to the ground.
Exactly.
So I really begin to question design policies that say, oh, we're not going to put armor on the legs where all the actuators are. That's a terrible idea! But then again, the Tau have been known for brilliant ideas, and that's, I think, where the Manta comes in?
Yes, your favourite one. The Manta Missile Destroyer, also known just simply as the Manta. It's a super heavy vessel used by the Tau for the transportation of whole hunter cadders. Now, it's essentially a small spacecraft. Now, it's armed primarily with 2 heavy railguns located in each wing, which can destroy an unshielded Warhound scout type in a single shot. Now, but beside these standard rounds these railguns can fire, they can also fire sub-munitions, which are given to these sub-munitions are given a drone-level artificial intelligence to direct the shell to the target. It can, for short-range engagements, it's also equipped with 6 long-barreled ion cannons, grouped in batteries of 3 in each wing, 16 long-barreled drone-controlled burst cannon turrets, 10 Seeker missiles, and it can also carry, quite frankly, it can carry a shit ton of things. It can carry 4 vehicles, either Devilfish, Hammerhead, Skyrays, or Piranhas. It can also carry up to 10 Crisis battle suits, 5 broadside battle suits, up to 12 Tetras, 12 drone sentry turrets, 36 heavy gun drones. It's just, it's a heavy dropship. That's also a spaceship.
Okay, so I would be equating this to a real-life flying aircraft carrier. It's what it is. It can basically bring in an entire army all at once by itself. I'm not necessarily going to talk about the issues of how something can re-enter and exit atmosphere at will of this size and still maintain flight. That we would be here all day, literally all day, talking about the issues of aerodynamics, of engine power, of having to go in and out of atmosphere without burning up. They do it. I'm just gonna give them that one. As far as a tactical weapon choice idea, this is actually kind of really smart. I hear a lot of people talk about, Battlefleet Gothic and the Imperator battleships or their cruisers or what have you. That's nice. Can they go into the atmosphere and provide direct fire support? No, they can only orbitally bombard. Well, guess what ours does? Because when I looked this up in Battlefleet Gothic, the Tau Manta Ray is basically a Corvette. The smallest class of ship that can be put out. But that means that you literally have, in a sci-fi game, a spaceship that is designed to fight in space against other spaceships, coming down to the ground and fighting against things on the ground. I even think there's a rule in the game of, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't there a rule for this thing that basically says too big to care? Where you shoot it and it's so big that it doesn't give 2 shits that you shot it?
I need to double check that. I haven't actually got the latest Tau Codex.
Yeah, the last time I saw one of these things ran, it basically had a save that was beyond an invulnerable save. It was just, I get to roll a die and on a 5+, it just didn't care that you shot it. And I'm like, that's massive. This is their nearest equivalent to an Imperial Titan or an Orc Gargant, but I kind of feel that it might have a bit more utility than either of those things, and even it doesn't necessarily have more firepower in terms of a single shot weapon, such as, you know, the Warlord Titan having a volcano gun or whatever their big massive guns are. But it has more utility firepower in the fact that it literally just has more guns. This has more guns than a Gargant. I didn't think that was possible. The orcs would be very proud. As I imagine they are when they encounter the Tau and go, oh, hello. I would imagine an orc commander really wanting to get his hands on one of these things. And then proceed to orc it out.
And paint it red, obviously.
And now I just got this horrific image of a manta ray that's been orked out with more guns, and went, oh crap. The issue here, however, is the size. When you bring in any sci-fi setting I've seen, when you bring in a ship from space, literally it's everything shoot at that. So I imagine it has to have a lot of layers of shielding. It has to have very thick armor, especially if you're going to do atmospheric entry and re-exit constantly, because shields aren't necessarily going to be a good idea to save you from that. You want the shields to be used to shield you from the incoming ground fire, not from the heat that you're going to generate going in and out of atmosphere.
Considering it weighs over 382 tons, I would hope that some of that would be on some decently thick armor plating.
And it probably not only has to, it probably has to be on thick armor plating as well, because of the radiation that is going to be generated by 6 long-barreled ion weapons, in addition to exiting and re-entering the atmosphere constantly. You're really going to need some thick radiation shielding, much less actual armor to stop incoming fire. The other issue that I really have with this thing is I could just see systems getting knocked out. You have to have these big air intakes on the front, on the top and bottom, and those are obvious weak points. But how does this thing perform against, say, fighters? Like, is this thing does this thing need a fighter escort? Because I'm thinking that it might operate more like a B-52 or a B-29, where you need an escort or you're going to get shot down, even with all those extra turrets on you and all that extra firepower. It doesn't amount to anything if, you know, a fighter can come by and keep strafing you over and over again, and you just can't track it. So,
yeah, I can imagine it having a hard time if it comes across a pair of Thunderhawk gunships. You know,
hard time with a pair of Thunderhawk gunships, particularly hard time with some Imperial Guard Valkyries, because those things are doing faster than the speed of sound.
Yeah. And even Orc fighter bombs will probably give it a hard time as well.
Which brings up something else interesting that you have to remember is a lot of Warhammer 40K. There's a lot of armies that want to get in close combat melee. I'm thinking some Assault Marines wouldn't mind driving up in a Thunderhawk and just jumping out of the Thunderhawk onto this thing.
There'd be quite a few armies I can imagine doing that. So obviously you're going to have the Space Marines, you know, deploying from a Thunderhawk. You're going to have York Storm Boys. You're going to have things like, you know, your Tyranic Gargoyles and Harpies. The Dark Eldar Scourges, they're going to be, you know, well, even those on probably you can get even the ones on Reaver jet bikes as well. Could probably get enough velocity to get alongside of Hellions on their skyboards. There's a lot that could probably just get onto it and just start tearing chunks out of it, and just whacking with a big stick.
And if you get them on there and they knock out the turrets for the burst cannons on the wing that they have on the side they happen to jump out on, that's bad, because then they can just start tearing into it, and you can't have. See, this is the issue. Is the position of the turrets is very poor in my opinion, because the turrets can't support each other in the event that something is on the ship itself. More importantly, there's no actual turrets on the top of the center or on the bottom of the center. Every single bomber I know that has incorporated machine gun turrets has a top gunner and has a belly gunner. They don't have that. Why? What design choice made you not want to do that? Because we always found there was a need for both of those things. And with the ability to jump out of an aircraft and land on this aircraft with, I'm assuming, magnetic boots, for instance, on the Space Marines.
Yeah.
They're just going to walk around and start ripping into it with chainswords and melt-a-bombs. That's really bad. Unless you're going to... And there's no... I get that viewports on a spaceship are a weakness. I hope they have cameras or something, because there are no viewports on the side of this thing at all. And if those turrets get knocked out and those were your only source of information coming from the sides of this vehicle, if something's on the wing, you don't know it's there until it's literally about to get inside the hull.
At which point it'll probably end up being too late.
Exactly. Other than that, yeah, this is a really solid idea. None of the other armies seem to have incorporated the idea that we should bring our spaceships down onto the ground to fight for us.
That we've looked into so far.
True enough. Because could you imagine an Emperor-class battleship suddenly deciding, I'm going to go down to the planet now and deal with this? Instead of, just nuking the planet from orbit, actually going down and just opening fire into the army.
I think if an Emperor-class battleship decided to land on a planet, it'll probably end up fucking up the planet's gravitational field.
Just a little bit.
Because I remember seeing a size chart of like all the famous ships from sci-fi, and I think that the Emperor-class battleship was actually bigger than the Death Star.
A little bit, just a little bit.
So, now, bear in mind the Death Star is the size of it was about. I remember seeing Film Theory's channel. They calculate the size of it, and I think it was around about 80 kilometers in diameter at least.
I think they said 80 kilometers in diameter, which is still huge.
Yeah. So this thing's at least an Emperor-class battleship is going to be at least 100 kilometers. That's basically the size of a small country coming down and.
Here's a small country. What?
With a whole small country's worth of guns.
But I approve of the idea. I approve of how they have implemented their military doctrine as far as bringing in a space-worthy craft to direct fire support. I don't necessarily approve of the design of the craft. They probably should consider moving a couple turrets to the top, to the direct top and the direct bottom, or just adding them. I don't imagine those, with all the firepower this thing has, I don't imagine those turrets are actually taking up very much of this thing's reactor. They could probably just add a couple turrets to the top and a couple turrets to the bottom and not really strain the reactor that much.
Or just strap a couple of storm surges to the wings.
I could imagine, though, if you wanted to put the broadsides out there and have them magnetically clamped to the wings, you could do it. It would probably not be the best idea for the broadsides pilots who would not enjoy the bumpy ride, but you could probably do it.
Make one hell of a cool visual, though, you have to admit.
It would. It would. I could really imagine some hardcore 80s metal rock bursting out as it comes out of the clouds, and they're like, it's a manta ray, and then there's two storm surges and what is this one again? The XV, the K9 139 Supremacy armor. So there's a storm surge on each wing and the the 139 on top of it, and you're just like, shit, we're boned.
All the while you hear the song Painkiller by Judas Priest.
Exactly. That would be beautiful. And I could just see the best image I have in my head right now is an orc looking up at that. So he's shooting and he sees that and he slowly lowers his shooter, looks up and goes, "They brought all the DACA." And I can imagine that if you know what, if it's got the armor to support it and it's got the thrusting capability, because obviously it does, because it can bring one in. If a 139 can stand on top of this, I think that would actually solve the 139 speed problem.
This is true.
I
think that leaves it now for Tal vehicles. So everyone, write in the comments below what faction do you want to see us cover next time. Do you want to see us cover the Eldar, the Adeptus Mechanicus? Do you want to see us cover squats? Do you want to see us cover chaos? Write down in the comment section below and see what you want us to cover.
I'm waiting, or we could cover do a special episode on walkers.
Oh, yes, that as well. Yep.
Or the Tyranids actually have some interesting ideas about how armor should work.
Or even the Necrons.
Necrons freak me out. You know this, right?
Don't worry, for that episode I'm just going to keep playing the Terminator theme over and over again.
But
so anyway.
I hope you guys have enjoyed. This is Fiaura officially signing out for right now, and here's the previous video for you guys. And I think that that 40K Theories is also going to link the previous video. I'm also going to provide a link to the other half of the video.
Yes, indeed. This has been Rambles from 40K Theories, and we'll see you all again next time.
Bye-bye!